Hi, everybody. My name is Lev, and today we're going to talk about. So, according to Wikipedia, free will is the capacity of people to choose between different possible courses of action, to exercise control over their actions in a way that makes them morally responsible, or to be the ultimate source of their own actions. So if you go to YouTube right now and search the paradox of choice, there's going to be a video by the psychologist Barry Schwartz. And in that video, he mentions that once there's abundance of choices, a person can become paralyzed and not choose anything at all. And if he does choose something, he most likely will regret it because he has so many options that he feels he could have done even better. So this video is very fascinating to me because especially that whole paradox of choice. One thinks that if you have more options, it's good because you have more ability to choose and you're not limited. But at the same time, Barry argues that our minds aren't designed to have so many options and so many things to choose from because we always become paralyzed with what we need to do at the end of the day. So he gives examples about how in the past we didn't have that much options. We just had our communities, our families, and the things that we had to do. You were born into something and you continued doing that something your whole life. But now we live in the modern world where we can become basically anything that we want to if we put our minds to it. And that puts like a little toll on us because we think we could possibly even be better. I could possibly do this, I could do that, I could do that. But we have so many options that at the end of the day, we don't do anything at all. And that creates this paradox that limits us and affects us. At the end of the video, he does give like a hopeful message that in order to be happy, we need to lower our expectations. And I definitely took that more as a know your limits type of way. So we might have a lot of options, we might have a lot of things to do and a lot of things to become, but we also need to know what we're good at and we're not good at and our limits so we can focus on just that one thing. Because if we do have so many options, we can just paralyze ourselves and other people and not do anything at all. So the video does reflect a lot about how balance is going to be key in this modern world, especially when everything is just so full of abundance and full of things. Continuing on with the second part, 2. There's a movie called Portrait of a Lady on Fire that takes place in 1760s, and the protagonist Heloise is going to get married off to another aristocrat, but she doesn't know that person, that guy, so she's not very thrilled about it. And her mother hires a painter, a young woman, to come and paint her before she leaves, and that painter is named Marianne. So once the journey begins that Marianne is going to start painting Heloise, they both fall in love and they both understand who they really are. So there's a scene where Marianne tells Heloise that she should go to an orchestra to experience live music, and Heloise does go. But once she comes back, she mentions the line that, "In solitude, I felt the freedom that you spoke of, but I also felt your absence." And that made me think a lot about how we strive for freedom, but sometimes that freedom can come with loneliness and an absence of somebody. Like you can go and travel the world and go experience new things, but if you do it alone, do you have somebody to share that with? We do have photos and videos, clearly, but I believe it's not the same video and a photo of you enjoying than bringing someone along to experience the same thing you're experiencing. And that freedom that we strive so much, does it always come with that solitude? I don't believe it always does come. I feel like we could find that middle ground again with the balance thing. But I do believe that if we strive for an excess of freedom, eventually it's just going to come with an excess of loneliness. Now, that might be a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing per se. People do seem to find that excess of freedom that comes with loneliness, but I feel like not a lot of people might be aware that a consequence of also being a little too free. So that line from that movie made me reflect a lot about how even when we are probably not as free as we might believe we might be, having people around us experiencing the same that we do gives us this internal joy that we might be missing in our lives sometimes. So yes, freedom does equal sometimes to loneliness, but not necessarily all the times, and we can change that definitely. So that just makes me want to understand how we can continue being free but not being alone. How can we have those two things at the same time? Now let's continue to part 3. Like how we saw in part 2, where freedom can equal sometimes to loneliness. What happens when you have to make choices in your life that have consequences? So on the book The Idiot by Dostoevsky, it starts with the protagonist, Prince Mishkin, moving to Russia from Switzerland. He had multiple seizures, epilepsies in his youth, but he's been cured now and he's moving to Russia to meet a family member. The whole book tells a story about how he came to Russian society and how he really didn't feel like he belonged there, and they were misusing him and mistreating him in ways that he couldn't understand. And he had like a Christ figure too, which made him even more awkward and weird with the people living at that time. So the main point that I want to get to is that somewhere at the end, Prince Mishkin had to make an important decision to choose Aglaya or Nastasia Filipovna, which are two love interests of his. He loved them both and he wanted to be with them both, but he had to make a decision and he chose Nastasia Filipovna. This character was very chaotic in a lot of aspects, but very interesting in some ways. So the decision that he made ultimately cost him his life because he became ill again, and I don't want to spoil too much the book, but that decision cost him his life basically. And this goes with what happens when you have to make choices in life, and sometimes they are hard to make and they can look both very painful, but you have to make a decision. Because also in the book, Prince Mishkin was very passive on some aspects, and it makes you wonder how when life hits you with these hard decisions, even making not a choice is a choice. So what is the ultimate decision that you have to make? And this just made me reflect about how are we condemned to live free and not decide and have multiple options, or if we do decide to be condemned and suffer the horrible consequences of our choices when we don't even really know what they are. We might see them at the moment, how they come, but we don't know how the ultimate outcome might be. So this is like another way of reflecting that life is complicated and that making decisions is complicated, but making no decision is even worse than not making anything at all. So I believe that the best thing you could do is just make the decision at the moment with the right ideas, but never not choose anything and just become paralyzed, like the paradox of choice. So the book really does make you reflect about how society and everything is just stuck by these norms and they want to make you just to choose one option or the other. So what should you do on that moment? To decide or not to decide? Well, the eyes of Prince Mishkin is we could maybe not decide at all, or if we do, we can make the wrong decision at that moment, and we have to live with the consequences, and those consequences probably are not going to be seen at that moment, maybe in later years, or maybe even down various generations. So it makes you also wonder that the whole life choice is a very complex thing that we have to deal with every day, that we try not to think about it, but it's always in the back of our minds. In conclusion, like how we saw on part 1, the paradox of choice, we need to lower our expectations and just basically live life and see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, but free will is always going to be upon us, and we need to make the right choices in order to continue living properly. See you on the next video.